Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art and culture, and this is Billboard Breakdown. Seems like the end of a Billboard year can still surprise you, eh? If you had asked me 6 months or maybe a year ago if I wanted 2016's god-awful year in the Hot 100 to end like this, I would have justifiably called you crazy. But here we are. Seems like a lot of things have changed in this past week, and this Hot 100, prime example, the sort of week with a lot of change, including a new #1, and yet we had more returning entries than new arrivals. The more things change, the more they just stay the same, don't they? Oh, enough nebulous connections. We all know how we got here. Let's dig into our top 10 and our new #1, Black Beatles by Rae Sremmurd featuring Gucci Mane. The first #1 hit for all three artists. Now, there's a lot to deconstruct why this happened and why, for the most part, I'm actually okay with it. It's crushing any competition on its path in streaming and sales, and while radio has a long ways to catch up, the margin is so huge regardless, it's gonna easily hold #1. And again, this isn't all that surprising either. It's arguably Rae Sremmurd's best song in that it's okay, not bad or great. It actually is more of a song than just a meme like the Harlem Shake, but it's also tied to the Mannequin Challenge and thus has all the more virality. I certainly preferred being on the top to Closer by the Chainsmokers featuring Halsey, which despite airplay and YouTube dominance slid down to #2. And even then, that airplay peak right now, shaky as hell. This might have been the breaking point for that track. And when you look at Starboy by The Weeknd and Daft Punk, also pushed back to #3 though, see, I don't know with this one. Airplay momentum didn't actually break this week, and even if the sales discount didn't really give it enough traction, it actually gained on YouTube and held steady on streaming. It might hold up pretty well. What won't hold up is Heathens by 21 Pilots down to #4. It's losing airplay and streaming, sales are weakening, it's definitely vulnerable to a challenge like, say, from Let Me Love You by DJ Snake featuring Justin Bieber, which also slipped down to #5, but might still challenge, even though every other category feels kind of shaky right now. This takes us to the 24 Karat Magic by Bruno Mars, which rose up to #6 basically thanks to good sales and airplay, with streaming actually getting a bit of a boost this week that it desperately needed. Now this puts it above Side to Side by Ariana Grande featuring Nicki Minaj at #7, which slipped despite great airplay and huge YouTube. It doesn't quite have the sales or streaming to hold more traction right now. It did stay above Juju on Dat Beat by Zay Hilfiger and Zayn McCall, which are only at #8 thanks to streaming and sales because the radio sure as hell are not catching on with this, and why would they when Black Beatles basically fills the role except way better. Unfortunately, all this led to a rough week for Broccoli by Drum featuring Lil Yachty, elbowed back to #9 despite a good week on streaming as sales and airplay took some big hits. And finally, re-entering the top 10 despite the fact that I haven't heard anyone anywhere who likes this song, but it's getting crowbarred down the radio regardless. Don't Want to Know by Maroon 5 and Kendrick Lamar. Okay, somebody's buying this because apparently the sales are decent, but this is really only getting pushed by the radio and nobody else because the streaming YouTube absolutely miserable, and I have to hope that I'll keep it out of the top 10 sooner rather than later. And on that note, our losers and dropouts. On the one hand, I'm not exactly displeased that nearly all of Meek Mill's songs are off the charts, but they took with it Him for the Weekend by Coldplay featuring Beyonce, which actually did kind of grow on me a fair bit. Beyond that, we got a healthy crop of losers this week, most of them leaning towards the countryside. Setting the World on Fire by Kenny Chesney and Pink tanked after gains last week to 48. I Know Somebody by Low Cash continued down to 92. Vice by Miranda Lambert sputtered down to 70. Not a good sign as your lead-off single for that big double album that's going to be coming out soon. And Million Reasons by Lady Gaga lost hard down to 96. Not really a country song, but the principle here still applies. Beyond that, the one Meek Mill song that did stick around, Liddy with Tory Lanez, crashed down to 79. My Way by Calvin Harris faded down to 55. And Sneakin' by Drake featuring 21 Savage got a welcome cut off its gains down to 43. Granted, 21 Savage still came out this week stronger overall, and for that we need to look at our gains and re-entries, where in the former category he had two big ones. X with Metro Boomin and Future up to 37, and No Heart with Metro Boomin up to 57. Joy. Beyond that, our gains are all kind of a mixed bag. Yes, it's a good thing to see All Time Low by Jon Bellion surge up to 42, and Love Me Now by John Legend picking up off the video, that's not bad at 66. Hell, I don't even mind that much that Mercy by Shawn Mendes went up to 58. It's the best song off that album. But beyond that, What They Want by Russ rising up to 84 isn't precisely great, and May We All by Florida Georgia Line featuring featuring Tim McGraw, that's not really good either. Where things look significantly stranger are in their returning entries, because we got a lot this week. The biggest two by far are the worst. Bad Things by MGK and Camila Cabello back up to 73, and Look Alive by Rae Sremmurd up to 76. Keep in mind, I'm still not a Rae Sremmurd fan, even if I can tolerate Black Beatles. Beyond that though, I'm more confused that Gangsta by Kehlani is back to 100, or that Hold Up by Beyonce is back to 99. It's still a damn good song, but can somebody tell me what the hell Beyonce is waiting for if she's gonna release more singles? 6-inch, Freedom, Sandcastles, All Night, they would clean up right now. And sure, I'm happy Pitbull, Brockbat, Flo Rida, and Lunch Money Lewis with Green Light up to 97, but beyond that, Pen, Pineapple, Apple Pen by Picotaro is back at 82. Why? Whatever. I can't see memes having as much staying power in the Hot 100 as it is, and as such, let's refocus on our pretty sparse list of new arrivals. Starting off with number 98, Kill a Word by Eric Church featuring Rhiannon and Giddens.
That it can't be heard if I get on, kill her.
So it turns out record low ratings for the CMAs meant that it didn't really impact the charts nearly as much as I would expect, just managing to sneak this song in near the very bottom. And even that, it was all overshadowed by the overblown and overwhelmingly stupid controversy surrounding the whole Beyonce performance, which of course means that Daddy Lessons didn't rate-chart, which was asinine all around. It didn't get anything out of this. But there was one pernicious and toxic element that came in the aftermath of this conversation that needs to be burned out right now, and that is whether country music is racist and backwards. Speaking definitively about the audience, well, only about as much as the rest of rural America, and the past week has given you plenty of answers with regards to that question, but when you look to the artist and the industry, the answer is a lot more complicated. It's definitely true that there aren't that many black artists in country, but they definitely do exist, and some have been incredibly successful. Look at Darius Rucker, or especially Charlie Pride, the latter who had 29 #1 hits on the country charts, and both of these men were at the CMAs. But we don't even need to look that far. Seemingly beneath so many people's notice, Eric Church rolled out with his newest single and teamed up with Rhiannon and Giddens to do it, continuing his grand tradition of pushing criminally underrated artists regardless of who they are. And no, this would not be my personal choice for the next single. Mistress Named Music is a much better song. There's a strange dichotomy to all the violence that Eric Church would deliver upon words and language in the spirit of improving discourse. Kind of ironic there. But the core of his message, it's got real power to it. Like it or not, words do matter. And given how much sane conversation has been burned out of American culture thanks to echo chambers and polarization and social media, the message has a lot of power to actually bring down all that negative conversation, or even just start the conversation. And while this track has always been a little bit more staccato than I would prefer, but the solid interweaving electric and acoustic melodies, the more defined bass melodies playing off hints of organ, and the fact that Eric Church and Rhiannon Giddens have a fair amount of good chemistry and intensity definitely makes this song work it. It's a great track, and man, we've needed something like this from country in a while, so definitely check this out. Number 87, Selfish by PnB Rock.
I swear, you don't need nobody else, I swear. I want you all to myself because I'm selfish. I want you all to myself, I swear. You don't need nobody else. I want you all to myself.
Oh boy, this is awkward. See, when I see an artist I don't really recognize on the Hot 100, my first response is to Google who the hell they are. And so I discovered that this guy's a Philadelphia rapper and R&B singer, has been building local buzz for the past couple of years, and that he apparently got a 15-year-old pregnant back in April when he was in his early 20s, and in Pennsylvania, that's statutory. I say all this because now he's got his first ever debut in the Hot 100, and look, I might not be the biggest fan of Ty Dolla $ign or August Alsina, but I can definitely tell when somebody's trying to jump in their style, and PnB Rock is definitely in that lane. And that wouldn't exactly be a bad thing if PnB Rock was more consistent as a singer, but for every point where he reaches into his pretty decent upper range or steps into different melodic progressions, he drops into this nasal, flatter range that's just not all that interesting, and that's not counting the pitched up voice on the final hook that did not need to be there, and the lyrics really don't help. Forget the constant assertions of being selfish to hold on to this girl. While I don't mean to judge, if you're talking about the guy guys on your girl's dick, I'm going to have some questions if you're not going to explain it. And of course he doesn't. If anything, the song just feels kind of underwritten, and thus it wasn't even a surprise to see this guy's loosely affiliated with Fetty Wap. The best thing I can say about it is that the production's actually pretty decent. The main tones carry a lot of melody, even if the scraping percussion can't do a lot with it. Almost makes you happy when the trap beat and the brighter piano accents come in. Overall, honestly, I don't hate this, but I've also heard a lot better. If it's coming from this guy, I don't really care one way or the other. I'd rather not see someone in this situation get famous. Number 71, Setting Fires by the Chainsmokers featuring XYLO.
I can't go on and on, setting fires to keep you warm. I can't keep you from home, but I'm set on fire to keep you warm. I can't go on and on, setting fires to keep you warm.
So as I think it's been very well established at this point, I got no more use for the Chainsmokers. And I covered this track pretty thoroughly when I reviewed their last EP a week or so back. The melody on the pre-chorus is blatantly ripped off from No ID by Frank Music and Colette Carr. That vocal flourish XYLO does at the end of each verse isn't nearly as sexy as she thinks it is. The lyrics all kinds of questionable about sacrificing oneself to bring warmth to a guy who is cold and distant and pretty plainly undeserving for no solid reason, all reiterating a these guys can be saved narrative that feels hollow and disingenuous as hell when the Chainsmokers are pushing it. Coupled with the overlayered vocal effects against the rubbery main synths, the fake snaps, and a synth drop that's cribbed pretty generously from DJ Snake, it might not be the worst song off the Collage EP, but it's certainly close. Next, number 61, Bounce Back by Big Sean.
Wake up every morning, by the night I count stacks. Knew that ass was real when I hit it, bounce back. You ain't getting checks. Last night took an L, but tonight I bounce back. Boy, I've been broke as hell, catch the check and bounce back. D-Town LAX, every week I bounce back. Whoa, if you a real one, then you know how to bounce back.
You know, there's a part of me that actually does want to give Big Sean some credit for trying. He might have had a quieter year in 2016, but there have been improvements in his content and flow and delivery, either in the collaboration EP he did with Jhené Aiko, or some sparse guest appearances where he had the bad luck to get outshone by artists like Kendrick Lamar. So in a strange way, it kind of makes sense that his newest single is called Bounce Back, an attempt to leap back into the public consciousness, and his way of doing it is hopping on Drake's flows and style? Seriously? Well, to be fair, it requires he play to his lower register, and that's not bad for his voice. It makes him a little less nasal, especially when he kicks up into a quicker flow. And while there are points on the second verse where that flow can get a little rough, this is probably one of the better Big Sean songs that I've ever heard. And there's actually some solid wordplay here and there. If you fuck with my glory, I'm gonna drop the L and get gory. That's a pretty good line. And it helps that Big Sean at least admits he can take an L, he can take a loss. That's a lot more compelling than bland invincibility. Looking at you, Drake. His voice still isn't very commanding, and it's not like this empty production with flattened buzzy synths and trap snares that carry no melody give him a lot of help. Thanks a lot, Metro Boomin. But in terms of Drake impressions and Big Sean songs, this is actually pretty decent, all things considered. And speaking of Drake, number 14, Used to This by Future featuring Drake.
Get the lumber, I party with the real Madonna. Beat the odds, do numbers, and remain humble. Top punches, I'm so used to this. Bugging at the pound, I'm so used to this. I know where I'm from, but I got used to this. Mansion in the hills, I got used to this.
You know, kind of fitting that the last song I'll be covering for this year on Billboard Breakdown comes from Future and Drake, the perpetual frustrations of this show. Hell, in comparison with previous years, this is actually a pretty restrained one for Future on the Hot 100. Either that, or he's just gotten overexposed and I've gotten way better at tuning him out. But this is apparently the lead-off single off Beast Mode 16, a mixtape he's supposed to drop with Zaytoven at some point. And wow, this is not a good example. When Future was at his best, he was dark, he was moody, he went against beats that could either match him with bombast or went pitch black. This is neither. In fact, it's the kind of mess of that sloppy sounding piano against the drippy snares tapping beat and the awkwardly layered auto-tune. Nothing that makes Future sound all that good, especially when he's in his upper register. And that's where we get to the content, where now Future is complaining that he's gotten used to his wealth, you can't understand how it took to get there, and wow, I really don't care, Future. We've heard this before. At least Drake tries to sing in his more passionate range, complete with auto-tune in the first half of his verse, but again, Are we supposed to feel bad that Drake and Future got used to this lifestyle because they exploited a public that didn't care how creatively bankrupt they both are at this point? Nope, they're not getting a pass here, not from me. And with an instrumental that sounds this clumsy, definitely skipping this. So yeah, that was our last week at the Billboard year. It's kind of weird, starts off in December, ends in November, and again, kind of a weird week overall. For the best, okay, it's obvious. Killer Word by Eric Church and Rhiannon Giddens, it's taken this. Although Bounce Back by Big Sean did end up kind of working for me. As for the worst, see, Used to This was the primary contender, but Drake and Future just whiny and sloppy and overexposed on this song. Whereas the Chainsmokers and XYLO, the sloppy framing, the outright copycat nature of the instrumentation, say nothing of the content that turns my stomach, yeah, these guys are getting the worst of the week. See y'all next week for year 3 of Billboard Breakdown. That is, if you all want me to keep the series going, because I do have some ideas going forward, but I would really need your confirmation if Billboard Breakdown really is worth it. I've gotten a lot of favorable responses on here. It's been a lot of fun doing it, but hey, we'll see what happens next week. Till then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll